Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all having a great day so far. So today we're actually creating a very luxurious and elegant looking commercial lot in Windenburg on the Hare and Hedgehog lot, which was initially actually a cafe, but I actually bulldozed it and decided to create my own one here because I really like the environment that it was in, and I feel like we actually haven't created a lot of commercial lots on the channel besides like one cafe that I made like a while ago, and it was very like British themed and inspired. So I wanted to go around a different route and like actually create something that looked very elegant and luxurious. Especially with the addition of like the new kits that came out recently, it actually encouraged me even more to build a commercial lot like this, because initially I actually wanted to create some sort of like commercial lot that had like a hotel on like the first, second, third floor, etc., with like a restaurant on like the bottom floor that was like very elegant and luxurious themed. But then I was just like, you know what, I can't really like do that realistically in The Sims, because it would either have to be like a residential rental or like a restaurant or like a cafe or whatnot. So I was just like, you know what, with this build I'm just going to combine all of that into one, and you guys can like decide what you guys want this lot to be. So we actually incorporated a bunch of different lot types into this build, so it can become a restaurant, it could become a bar, it can also become a cafe, a lounge area, as well as like a residential rental, or you guys can just use it as like a normal typical rental lot, because it does have two different like living spaces. So we have two completely separate apartments on two different levels of the build, which I thought looked quite interesting and relatively small, because I wanted to focus on like the restaurant lot type aspect of this commercial lot. So the restaurant does also actually have access to the third floor, which is what we're doing right now, which is kind of like the balcony area, which is like extra seating, but it's just like upstairs. So although we do actually have outdoor seating on the first floor, we do also have it on the third floor as well, which I feel like was kind of like an interesting aspect to this build, and I feel like it's not really done that often. But then again, I feel like at the same time, like, is it really going to be that functional? Because there's already like so many like seating areas on like the first floor as well as like on the second floor. So I was like, I feel like there's not going to be any Sims who are going to bother to go onto the third floor to actually eat, if that makes sense. But I just wanted to like kind of like still incorporate it, because I wanted to go with like that theme or like that story, having some sort of like luxury rooftop restaurant experience, and like maybe you can like bring your date there, which I feel like would be a really cool lot to utilize when like the romance pack comes out. If you guys can like sort of like have some sort of like date on top of like the rooftop, I feel like that would be such an interesting way of storytelling. Or even if it's not like about storytelling, I feel like it would just be like really cool to utilize some sort of like rooftop like restaurant like fancy experience, if that makes sense. And I also incorporated some like nice fairy lights and stuff up there, which I thought looked really nice, and you guys would see that as we progress with the build. But yeah, so far we are just like incorporating some like nice windows and stuff that we'll see throughout like the entire build. And initially I was actually trying to like figure out what kind of window I actually wanted for this build, because I was actually going for those like very simple plain black framed ones, as you guys saw earlier in the video. But then I was just like, you know what, they stick out a little bit too much. So then I went with this very nice like base game one that has like a very nice like detailed frame on it, and then I actually didn't like that either, because it was just like the black color was just standing out a little bit too much. I really do actually like the way the black framed windows look on the curves, but I didn't like it on the flat wall. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to change the color of those to like be like a nice plain white. And especially because we were going with like a more light elegant theme for the bottom floor, I was like, it only made sense to just like continue that on like the other floors as well, which is the main reason why I would like the white windows instead. And as you guys can see, like I actually put a bunch of those like Cosy Bistro windows on the first floor, like all the way around, but obviously that does change. I just did that just for like referencing for myself, so that I know like what I need to like change and stuff like that, where I want the window placement to be and stuff like that. And here I'm actually just like trying to figure out how I want the entrance of like the actual like apartments section of this build is going to be, like the residential lots, which is actually the main way that you access the third floor as well. So yeah, I was thinking of like incorporating like a curve, as you guys saw a few seconds ago, but then I was just like, I just didn't like the way it looked, especially with like the top, like the second floor corner piece that like poked out a little bit too much. Instead I just like kept it as it was and like reduced the amount of windows that were around it. And yeah, just like added a nice, like I added the same door for the entrance of the like actual like residential area, which is like the same as like the cafe and like the restaurant door, but like I just kind of wanted to just like blend in with the environment, if that makes sense. So instead I just like left it as it was. And I also used a bunch of these like plain simple columns throughout like the entire build here and there, just so it like breaks it up a little bit, rather than it being like a full-on like rectangular or square design. It kind of just like breaks it up and makes it look a little bit more better, in my opinion. And we also have another door on like the back end sort of like area of this build, which is kind of like the staff only area, if that makes sense. So we kind of have like the staff waiter stations there and stuff like that. And here we're actually trying to like create the floor plan and stuff, and I actually left this in because I thought it would be interesting for you guys to see what I was trying to do. So as you guys can see, like as like there's like a very main like big entrance area where like the curved area is in like the corner part of this build, I wanted it to be like a nice grand entrance, so you could see like the bar immediately, and there was like a nice diagonal wall and stuff like that. And I was gonna make the diagonal wall like very nice and like detailed, but it just wasn't working out, so I just instead unfortunately had to get rid of it and put it in like a more like boxy way. But I do work around this. You guys will see like how I actually like incorporate some of the new objects that came from the Cafe Bistro pack to actually make that corner look a lot more interesting rather than keeping it like rectangular, if that makes sense. But yeah, we're just like utilizing the new bar and the actual like the ceiling shelving units, which I really do like the way it looks. Like I am really happy with the way the objects actually look in this pack. I don't know why, there's just something about the objects in this pack that look very detailed. So I feel like they really did put a lot of like time and effort into creating this one, and then you can really tell with like the designs on each of the objects. I mean, there's a few objects here and there that might look a bit questionable, but the ones that I definitely utilize in this build, which is pretty much all of them, look really amazing. I really do love the way the windows look. Like they look so nice and elegant. I feel like they work so well for executing some sort of like design that I was trying to go for here. And I actually really like the colors that it came in as well. So despite like the main color scheme being like a white and gold, I obviously incorporated a bunch of different colors throughout like the entire build as well. So we have a lot of the like such as like blues, blacks, greens, especially like in the restaurant and like the cafe area. The cafe area does have a bunch of different colors and stuff. And as you guys see here, I was actually trying to experiment and see like what I actually liked, because I wanted the tablecloth to be interesting, like look interesting as well. I didn't want it to just be like a plain white or black color, but at the same time I didn't want it to be checkered because it just didn't fit with like what I actually wanted. But in the end I went with like a more like nice simple white theme, and instead I just like let the details come out from like the flooring and the windows. And we also have a very nice like second floor bathroom area, which I just kept it like nice and simple. I didn't really add anything too special in it, just like 2 private toilet areas as well as like 3 sink areas, which look like very simple and stuff. There's nothing special to it really. And I was actually thinking of like what kind of sink area would look interesting here. As you guys saw, like I was actually trying out a few, and then I wanted to use like actual counter pieces and then place the sinks myself, but then I was only limited to placing 2. So then I was like, you know what, I'm just going to utilize these standalone sink units that I feel like worked a lot better anyway, because it's kind of like on a residential lot, it doesn't really matter too much what you pick for the sink units in my opinion. And I obviously like went back and incorporated the windows and extra details and stuff, but I was trying to like initially fill out all of the requirements for the bar, I believe. So just trying to include as much as I could, and I really wanted to incorporate this jukebox, but it looked like it reminded me of like a very steampunk sort of like theme, which I don't know if I really wanted to keep, but in the end I do end up like keeping it, because my other option was the record like vinyl player that came from like the most recent party kit, which I didn't really want to utilize on the first floor because that was just like 1 tile, and I wanted to use that to incorporate like a nice looking jukebox, but I didn't know that that was the only one that we had. So yeah, I just incorporated it and left it, and I didn't really mind it, to be honest, because it was just like one object that looked out of place anyway. And I actually utilized the short curtains that came from the Cosy Bistro kit, which I initially thought like it was kind of like useless because it didn't really cover anything and you couldn't use it in like certain places, but actually I really liked the way it looked, and it really added to the windows. Surprisingly, I wasn't actually expecting it to, but as I was like adding it, I really didn't mind it, and I actually really liked the way it looked in the end. And I also utilized the other curtain that came in the kit as well in different ways. So I actually utilized a taller version of it in places where the windows were kind of like facing the less interesting areas of the build, such as like the actual like bar area, or like the shelving units, or like the cashier area, or like the cafe like service table place. So in areas where I felt like it was less interesting to like look at, I kind of like covered it more with curtains, whereas like the areas where there were a lot more like seating areas, I used a lot more of like the shorter curtains, which I felt like made a lot more sense in my opinion. And we also have like a very nice simple kitchen area for the restaurant functionality, and we have the waiter table there. And I actually placed a waiter table at the entrance here as well, as you guys can see, but I actually replaced that later on with the host table, which made a lot more sense. Obviously, as you enter the main area of like the restaurant, you want to be like hosted and stuff, which I thought looked quite cool. And I kind of like used the divider that came in the kit to kind of like break that corner apart so it doesn't look too sharp. It kind of just like looks like a diagonal, and I wanted to use that divider as if it was some sort of like welcome sign, if that made sense. I didn't really put anything on it, I just left it as it was, but I felt like it looked really nice the way it was, so I didn't really feel a need to like touch it. And I used this very nice like simple base game. Like I feel like this countertop kind of like reminds me of like a very professional or like an industrial kitchen, so I just utilize those kitchen units, which I really do like the way they look in like these like more professional environments. And I just like added some like clutter around here and there just to like make it look a bit more interesting and like a more like serious kitchen. So I do go back and like incorporate some more like kitchen knives and stuff like that on top of the shelves, as well as like some like pots and pans that were like hanging off the walls and stuff. But yeah, before we do that, we actually jump to the second floor, and as you guys can see, we're actually utilizing the second floor as like another area of the restaurant. As I mentioned, we also have the third floor, like the balcony area, and I wanted to actually incorporate the second floor as well because I wanted it to be more of like a family area, if that makes sense. We have a lot of like two-seaters and stuff on the first floor, whereas like on the second floor we have like the booth table and seating area. We also have like a lot more like free seaters and stuff like that, so I feel like it's more like it just like accompanies a lot more like people, if that makes sense, rather than having just like two-seaters everywhere. We also went with like a different color scheme for the second floor, which I felt looked a lot more like nicer and stuff, and it felt like a lot more moody as well in my opinion. So I kind of got inspired by a Starbucks that is actually very close to I'm not sure if you guys know, but in London there's like this specific place called Oxford Circus, and there's like a very nice like Starbucks there which had like a lot of interesting wallpapers and textures. So they had like this very nice wall that was like a dark green wainscoted design, but then as you went to the underground it had like this very nice baby blue wainscoted design, and I was just like, you know, that looks really cool. So yeah, that's kind of like the inspiration that I got when I was building this build as well. So we're going with like a more like a darker theme on the second floor, whereas like the bottom floor kind of has like a more lighter theme, but at the same time it's still like the same style and design as we're using the same wallpaper. And I really do like this green color that came in this kit. I don't know why, but everything just works so well, and I really love the gold like trim that goes around like the entire wallpaper. I feel like that looks so cool and luxurious. And since the bathroom is actually on the second floor, I felt like it made sense to add some like accent colors into this bathroom as well. And obviously as we're going with like a more green color scheme, I wanted to incorporate some of that green color into the bathroom as well. And we actually make it a little bit more smaller as well, and we move around some of the objects such as like the shelving and stuff so that we can fit another nice like three-seater on one of the sides of the wall, as well as like utilizing as many of the objects that came from the kit as much as possible. So whenever I went around the build and tried to like add some sort of like plant or poster or whatnot, I tried to make sure I was trying to like find the same object from the kit so that I don't have to utilize like too many like objects, if that makes sense. So I was trying to use as many of the objects that came in the pack as much as possible, which I believe I did actually manage to utilize every single object that came in the kit, which is kind of like great. So if you guys are wanting to utilize this build, you guys don't have to worry about too much about it being missing, in my opinion, as I have utilized as much of the objects from the kit possible. And I also utilize a bunch of different like decorational object pieces that I feel like you would see in like real life restaurants as well, such as like the exit only signs, as well as like fire hydrants and the pots and pans and the knives, as I was mentioning earlier in the video. But yeah, and I also utilize a lot of the lighting that actually came in the kit, such as like the sconces and like the ceiling light as well, and I utilize that throughout the entire build. So you would definitely not see a lot of saucer lights in this build if you guys do plan on downloading it, because I felt like it was just like very necessary and it made sense to utilize the lights that came in the kit. So I didn't really feel the need to like utilize a lot of saucer lights in this build, in my opinion. But yeah, we kind of just like moved on to the cafe now, where I don't actually have like, we don't have a lot of space in the cafe, and it's kind of like its own standalone shop. So initially I wanted to actually connect it to the restaurant, and I didn't want it to be like its own standalone like shop, but unfortunately it didn't end up working out because it was just like, it wouldn't have made sense. And I feel like your Sims will get very confused if you guys were like planning to utilize like the restaurant aspect of this build, primarily because like the Sims will be sitting in like the cafe seats and like the tables and stuff, whereas like they're not sitting in like the cafe area, if that makes sense, which would have been unfortunate. So instead what I did was I just like kind of like removed most of the tables, and I believe I only kept like one table that was like closest to like the window, and instead I kind of just added like a simple like lounge sort of like situation where there was like a nice like two-seater area there with like a nice coffee table in the middle, rather than having too many tables in the cafe area. And we obviously utilized the same like shelving units that came from this kit throughout like the entire cafe area as well, because I felt like it looked so nice and it just like worked out well in my opinion. And I also wanted to utilize the coffee machine that came from the kit, but it wasn't slotting onto the like necessary like espresso like part of the cafe object, if that makes sense. So instead I just made like its own like standalone like countertop area at the back of like the cafe like serving unit place, and instead I just placed like a coffee machine in the center of it, as we'll see in like a few minutes. But yeah, I just like decided that like I didn't want to utilize a lot of tables and chairs in the cafe area, so instead I just went with like these like two nice simple book nook kit seaters, and I just had like a nice coffee table in the middle. And yeah, I just had like the booth seats as well empty as well, and I didn't really like hook them onto any tables or anything like that, because I just felt like it wasn't really necessary for a cafe in my opinion. And we're actually moving on to one of the apartments now, which is on the second floor, and initially we're actually going with this dream home decorator style like modern furniture pieces and appliances, but this actually ends up changing because I wanted the second floor apartment to be less like, I didn't want it to look as extravagant as the one on the third floor, if that makes sense. So this actually does end up changing. So we don't actually use the dream home decorator objects for this kitchen. And I kind of had to like speed up a little bit because it was just like taking quite a lot of time to build all of these different parts of the actual commercial lot, unfortunately. So yeah, bear with me as I just like skip around here and there in certain areas where I feel like it's just like not as interesting to watch in my opinion. But yeah, we just added some like nice simple like brown wooden detailing throughout like the walls, as well as like the flooring, as well as like the bedroom as well. Like, so this is kind of just like a one bedroom like studio apartment, I guess. It's not really like spacious, or doesn't even have any space at all in my opinion, but I just really do like the way it looks. It does kind of look quite cozy in my opinion. And we went with like the nice simple book nook two-seater area, as well as like two nice simple like side seats, I guess, single seats. And I didn't really incorporate a lot of like detail and stuff into these like apartments and stuff, because I feel like realistically, if you're downloading this lot, I highly doubt you guys would be interested in utilizing like the residential aspect of it. But obviously it is there if you guys are interested in utilizing it. And I did want to utilize the flooring that came from the kit in like the kitchen areas of this build as well, just to like, you know, like keep it a bit cohesive in my opinion. Even though it wasn't like to do with the restaurant or the cafe, I still wanted to like include some parts of the kit in the actual like apartment areas as well. And here I am, I'm just like actually creating the, I don't know what this would be actually referenced or called. I believe it's kind of just like a lobby area of like the actual like restaurant, which is kind of like the third floor. So as you enter the third floor, you're not only entering the second apartment, you're actually entering the balcony as well, which is actually owned by the restaurant as well. So as you go to the third floor, you'll be able to have access into the actual like outdoor area where you can like sit and eat here as well. And initially I was just going to leave it like this and incorporate some like nice tables and chairs, but then I was like, you know what, it's looking a bit too empty, so we're going to create a very nice like simple garden area on the third floor as well, by utilizing some nice hedges that go all the way around like this part of like the balcony that is facing like outwards towards the actual like city area. And we're actually just like placing some very nice like fairy lights and stuff over some of these tables and chairs, which I thought looked quite nice and interesting. And I actually wanted to incorporate that on the first floor, but instead I was like, you know what, we can incorporate that on the third floor and it would look just as interesting in my opinion. And I really like the way that two-seater like table looked, that was like towards like the curve of the actual like exterior. I feel like that looked very interesting in my opinion. I feel like being able to sit in that specific like seat and being able to like look out would be like such a nice view in my opinion. But yeah, we're moving on to the actual like final apartment in this build, which is kind of just like the more luxury like high-end apartment, which is kind of weird because it kind of like the front door is kind of like the lobby of like the third floor like the restaurant, so it's kind of like in a weird place. But I feel like it was kind of like interesting, especially for like storytelling, as I was mentioning like earlier in the video, how I was kind of like envisioning some sort of like restaurant at the bottom and hotel sort of like vibe at the top. I wanted it to kind of be like replicated in the build, although we can't really have restaurants and hotels at the same time, so, or even hotels in general. So instead what I did was like I pretended as if like the top suite was kind of like the most like luxurious one in comparison to the other ones, or even like pretended as if like the top suite was like some sort of like penthouse sort of situation, which I feel like is kind of like unrealistic because of how small the apartments really are. But like just going off with like the storyline of like having a more luxurious like high-end like home, the higher like the building is, if that makes sense. And I just went around and added some like extra posters here and there where I felt like was necessary. And we're actually moving on to the exterior, so I actually filtered the items by city living, and I was just like looking around seeing like what I can actually utilize for the exterior of this build, because I was like there's so many like things that we can like actually add for this commercial lot, especially like this like fire escape route, which I feel like doesn't really make sense, but at the same time like I didn't really mind it, and it was kind of just like something to make this wall look a bit more interesting than it really is, because it was just looking like really flat, and we don't really have a lot of rooms or like parts of the build that like kind of like poke out. It's relatively flat, so I felt like this fire escape route thingy kind of like made it a bit more dynamic, if that makes sense. And I pulled out some objects from the debug and live edit mode just so that I can get some extra objects that I feel like would look very nice in this build. And I actually tried to use these like shore wall heights next to some parts of the windows to make some like some sort of like interesting like flower bed sort of situation, but then it just wasn't working out because I was trying to utilize the wainscoting from some of the wallpapers, but it just wasn't like working out properly. So instead I just went with like these like nice plain like iron short fencing, and I just placed some like nice plants inside of it throughout like the entire build, where I thought it was like really necessary. I didn't utilize it too much because I didn't want it to look too busy with plants and stuff, but just use it where I thought it was like quite necessary. And I utilized a lot of these like cypress trees in these like nice flower bedding sort of things that I'm not sure what they really are, but I just place these like nice cypress trees in them. And I actually didn't notice, but the area of Windenburg does actually utilize quite a lot of cypress trees, so it was kind of like convenient that I decided to go with those. And towards the back of the lot I actually utilize a lot more of like the trees that we see closer towards like the park and the fountain, which is kind of like made a lot more sense, and it fit with the environment really well in my opinion. And I just went around and added some like extra few details here and there that I felt like was kind of like necessary, such as like these like chalkboard signs and stuff like that, just to like interact and entice customers to like go into the coffee shops and stuff, as well as like the restaurants. And I found this like nice interesting bike rack that I don't think I've ever used before in my opinion, but yeah, I just utilized it here and I felt like it was kind of cool. And I also made like a very small little parking lot sort of situation. But yeah, it seems that we have came towards the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know by leaving a like and subscribing. I also have a bunch more videos on my channel that I highly suggest that you guys can check out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. And before we end the video, I wanted to go through a quick tour with you guys just so you guys can see what the actual build looks like. So we have a very nice grand entrance with some very nice seating on the side. Then once we go in, we can see there is like a very nice bar area and like a nice seating area, as well as like the other entrance over there on that side with like the nice ceiling lights that came from the kit. And we also have some additional seating area on this side. And then once we go upstairs, we've got some extra nice seating on the second floor with a very nice green theme. And this thing on the ceiling is always going to be like that when you're using curved walls, because the game is kind of just like buggy when it comes to curved walls. But yeah, we have just like a very nice simple green theme on the second floor. And we also have a simple bathroom in here, which I don't know why this is dirty, but it just is, I guess. And then to access the actual like apartments and stuff and the third floor. But before I do, I want to show you guys what the actual like kitchen area looks like first. So this is kind of like the employee only door with like the waiter station, and this door leads to the bar area. And then this door kind of like leads to the like the main kitchen area here. We can utilize this door to enter the actual like apartments, which has the apartment like mailboxes here. Once we go upstairs, we are greeted with the first apartment door, which is the very nice and simple looking studio apartment. Then once we go upstairs, we are greeted with the final and third floor, which has kind of like the main restaurant, like third floor lobby. And then we have the actual like the luxury suite sort of like studio apartment, a nice simple toilet area. And we also have another nice curve here, and once again the ceiling is bugged, but that's just how it is when you're using curved walls. And once we go outside, you are greeted with the balcony area, which you are able to sit here and dine out with the restaurant. And this is the overlooking view of the very nice like curved seating area bit. And yeah, that is pretty much it for the tour of this restaurant.